A manager locks the door and pours himself a drink. He just fired a woman. Not for being late, not for stealing, but for refusing to sell herself to his clients. Right now, she is standing alone in the pouring rain with nothing but a bag of dirty clothes and $47 to her name. He believes he has won. He believes she will disappear, just like the others. But there is a black SUV parked across the street, and the man sitting inside it owns the building, the business, and every dollar that keeps that manager employed. He watched the whole thing. He saw her get thrown out. He saw the door slam shut. And now, he is lowering his window. He is about to ask one question that will cost that manager his career, his reputation, and his freedom, all before the sun comes up. What happened? 2 words. That is all it took to burn a corrupt empire to the ground and give one woman her life back. If this is the kind of justice you want to see, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a story. I have another incredible one ready for you tomorrow. While you are here, leave a comment and let me know where in the world you are listening from. I truly love seeing our global community connect. Now, let us return to the story. That night, the rain felt like a personal judgment, a cold, heavy downpour that pasted her thin black work shirt to her skin. Olivia walked aimlessly into the darkness, hugging herself with one arm, while her other hand gripped the strap of her olive green bag. It was her only possession, her only anchor in a world that had just let her go. The slum road stretched out before her, its cracked pavement slick with water, reflecting the weak, flickering glow of the streetlights. She was crying now, the tears mixing with the rain, past the point of caring who might see her collapse. Her dark hair was plastered in wet strings across her cheeks. The beige apron she had to wear every shift was still tied around her waist, a damp, wrinkled reminder of her failure. Her black pants were soaked, and her cheap sneakers made a pathetic squelching sound with every single step. She was the perfect picture of a woman who had absolutely nowhere else to turn. For 8 long months, she had worked at the Eclipse Lounge. 8 months of serving drinks to men whose eyes lingered for too long, men who slid money across the bar with unspoken offers attached. They were men who mistakenly believed a polite smile was an open invitation. For 8 months, she kept her gaze lowered, did her job perfectly, and refused every single advance. But in the end, it was not enough to save her. Her job included a small room upstairs, a space that was little more than a storage closet. But it was her own space. Inside, there was only a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, and a lock on the door. That lock meant everything. It was the line between being a waitress and being for sale. It was the thing that allowed her to say no and still have a roof over her head. But tonight, she had said no for the last time. The club's manager, a tall man in sharp suits who always smiled as if he held a secret over everyone, had begun bringing in different girls about 3 weeks ago. He called them dancers, but Olivia understood the truth. She had seen the transactions in the back rooms and heard the hushed negotiations. She had watched men pay for much more than just another round of drinks. Last week, he had finally approached her directly. "You have a pretty face," he had said, leaning casually against the bar as she polished glasses. "The customers are always asking about you. You could be making some serious money." She had turned him down, politely but firmly. He continued to push the idea. She refused him again. This evening, he had given up on asking. "Pack your things," he had ordered, appearing in her doorway without the courtesy of a knock. "You are finished here." "What? Why?" she had stammered, completely blindsided. "You do not want to work," he stated coldly, "so you do not get to stay." "I do work," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Not the kind of work I need from you." She tried to reason with him, to remind him that she had never agreed to do anything other than serve drinks. But he was already walking away, his back turned to her. He had already signaled for 2 of his security guards to come and remove her. They granted her only 5 minutes to throw her few belongings into her bag. Then, they marched her down the rear staircase, through the bustling kitchen, and out into the alley. Just as they pushed her outside, the rain had started to fall. The heavy door locked securely behind her. There was no severance pay, no apology, and certainly no second chance. There was only the rain. She walked because she had nowhere else to go. She had no family she could call, and no friends who lived close enough to help her in the middle of the night. Every dollar she had managed to save was in her bag, perhaps enough for a week at a cheap hostel if she was extremely lucky. But maybe it was not even that much. The streetlights above her buzzed and sputtered, some completely burned out, leaving long, menacing stretches of the road consumed by total darkness. Cars drove by from time to time, their headlights slicing through the downpour, but not one of them ever slowed down. This was not the sort of neighborhood where good Samaritans stopped to offer assistance. Olivia could not blame them. She would not have stopped either. She just kept moving forward, placing one foot in front of the other as the rain streamed down her face, merging with the tears she no longer had the strength to suppress. Her throat was tight with a silent scream, and her chest felt like it was being crushed. She had fought so fiercely to maintain her dignity, to draw a firm line that no one could cross, and that very strength had cost her absolutely everything she had. It was then that she heard it. A low, deep hum from an engine slowing down just behind her. She did not dare to turn around. Women in her position learned early on not to acknowledge such things. But the sound did not go away. It grew closer, more distinct, and more deliberate. The black luxury SUV pulled up right beside her. It was sleek, enormous, and out of place, the water beating on its polished black surface like thousands of tiny glass jewels. This was the type of vehicle that simply did not belong in a neighborhood like this one. It was too valuable, too immaculate, too commanding. The windows were tinted to a deep, impenetrable black, making it impossible to see who or what was inside. It moved at her pace exactly. Olivia's heart began to pound against her ribs. She started walking faster. The SUV remained right beside her. She finally stopped. It stopped, too. For what felt like an eternity, nothing at all happened. There was only the sound of the rain hammering the asphalt and the quiet, powerful idle of the vehicle's engine. Olivia stood there completely frozen, soaked through to her bones, her bag clutched to her chest like a shield. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel the frantic pulse in her throat. Then, the rear window glided down, smoothly and silently. Inside sat a man dressed in a tailored black suit, the kind of suit that cost more than her entire annual income. His shirt was a brilliant, crisp white, open at the collar without a tie. His face was all sharp angles, hardened by experience, and his dark eyes stared at her without blinking, without offering any softness or pity. He had the kind of powerful presence that could dominate a room without him ever having to move a muscle. He was dangerous, composed, and undeniably in control. He offered no smile. He did not lean toward her. He simply watched her, as if he were calculating whether she was worth his time. Then he spoke. What happened? His voice was low and calm, yet it sliced through the noise of the storm like a razor. Olivia's breath hitched in her chest. She knew she should have kept walking. She should have run. She should have done anything that her screaming survival instincts were telling her to do. But she found that she could not move. Perhaps it was the bone-deep exhaustion. Perhaps it was the crushing desperation. Or maybe it was just the way he had asked the question, not with demand, not with pity, but with a simple, direct curiosity, as if he genuinely wanted to know the answer. She turned her body to face him, letting the rain pour over her face. For the first time all night, someone was looking at her as if she was a person who mattered. Her voice broke. She swallowed against the lump in her throat and tried again. I lost my job. The man's severe expression did not shift. He continued to study her for another long moment, his intense gaze traveling from her drenched uniform to the canvas bag in her arms, and finally to the tears she could no longer hide. Get in, he commanded. The words hung in the air. Olivia remained frozen. It was late, the kind of dangerous night that teaches you never to trust a stranger. especially not one in an expensive car. But she was already drenched, already defeated, and completely out of choices. And some deep instinct told her that refusing this particular man could be the most catastrophic mistake she would ever make. But Olivia did not immediately enter the car. She stood there on this broken sidewalk, rain cascading down her face, and stared at the open door of the SUV as if it were a predator's jaw waiting to snap shut. The inside was upholstered in black leather, perfectly clean and completely dry. Warm air carrying the scent of rich cologne and something else, perhaps power or absolute control, drifted out to meet her. The man waited with immense patience. He did not repeat his command, nor did he try to coax or convince her. He just sat there, his expression still unreadable, one arm resting comfortably on his knee, watching her as she made her choice. "I do not," Olivia began, her voice faltering. "I do not know you." "No," he calmly agreed. "You do not." "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice trembling, his jaw clenched for a fraction of a second. "I have not yet decided if I am going to." The raw honesty of his response was shocking. Most men would have lied, offering false promises of safety and kindness, offering things they never intended to give. This man offered her nothing more than a dry place to sit and an unanswered question. Olivia looked down the long, dark, empty road. There was only rain, darkness, and nowhere for her to go. She got into the vehicle. The heavy door shut behind her with a solid, definitive sound. The roar of the rain was instantly muted, reduced to a gentle drumming on the roof. The warmth enveloped her, and she suddenly became aware that she was shivering violently. The man did not look at her. Instead, he tapped twice on the glass partition that separated them from the driver. The SUV pulled away from the curb and smoothly rejoined the road. "Where are we going?" Olivia asked, her voice just a faint whisper. "You tell me," he replied. She had no answer for him. He turned then to face her directly, truly looking at her, and for the first time she saw him with clarity. He had dark hair, slightly damp around the edges, as if he had also been out in the storm just recently. His features were strong and defined, marked by a thin white scar that cut across his left eyebrow. He looked to be around 40, perhaps a little older. It was difficult to be certain. Men who lived his kind of life did not age like other people. They became harder, more refined. "You worked at the Eclipse Lounge," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. Olivia's heart nearly stopped. "How did you?" "The apron," he answered, nodding toward her waist. "And I recognized the uniform." She glanced down. The soiled beige apron was still tied around her, the club's Eclipse logo stitched in worn black thread on the front. She had completely forgotten she was still wearing it. "I am taking it off," she said in a rush, her cold fingers fumbling with the stubborn knot. "Leave it," he commanded. She froze, her hands still. "I want to see it when we arrive," he added, his voice low. "Arrive where?" she asked, but he had already turned away from her. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving across the screen with a swift and practiced purpose. He made a call and began speaking in rapid, fluent Portuguese. The man's voice was a low murmur, pitched just so she could not grasp the details. But then a single word cut through the quiet conversation, clear and sharp. "Eclipse." A cold dread washed over Olivia, sinking straight to her stomach. "You are taking me back to that place." It was not a question. It was a statement of pure fear. He finished his call and turned his gaze to her. "You have a problem with going back?" She could only answer with a quiet, desperate no. She forced herself to swallow against the tightness in her throat. "They terminated my employment. They physically threw me out. I am not wanted there." "Who let you go?" "The club manager. I never learned his real name. Everyone there simply calls him Señor." A subtle emotion crossed the man's expression, but it was not surprise. It was something far colder, something harder. "Tell me why he fired you." Olivia paused. the shame of the situation rising. This was the part of the story that always made her feel foolish and naive, like a child who did not grasp the fundamental rules of the world. "Because I refused," she mumbled, her eyes fixed on her own trembling hands. "He expected me to do things beyond just serving beverages." The car filled with a heavy silence. "And you told him no?" the man asked, his voice unexpectedly soft. "Yes." "How long did this go on?" "For 3 weeks, maybe even longer. He started pressuring me right after he hired the new women." The man shifted, leaning his back against the plush seat, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. "What new women?" "They were dancers," Olivia explained, but then she quickly corrected her statement. "At least, that is the title he gave them." Their job involved much more than just dancing on a stage. What exactly were they doing? She hated the thought of saying the words aloud. She did not want to be the person who had to describe the ugly truth of it all. But his stare was unwavering, calm, and incredibly patient. He would wait as long as it took. "They were entertaining the clients," she finally said, choosing her words with immense care. "It happened in the private rooms on the second floor. The same floor where your room was located." Olivia gave a small, defeated nod. The man's face remained a perfect mask of neutrality, but the atmosphere inside the car changed completely. A new, focused attention filled the space, a weight that had not been there moments before. He took out his phone again, typed a quick message, and then put it away. "You had a room above the club," he stated. "They provided me with a room when I first took the job. It was an essential part of my arrangement. I work the bar shifts. In return, I get a safe place to sleep." "And when you refuse to upgrade your services," he stated, his voice completely flat and devoid of emotion, "they revoked your living arrangement. They took the room away tonight." "Yes." He was silent for what felt like an eternity, his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked city streets blurring past the window. Olivia could not decipher his expression. She had no idea if he believed her story, if he felt any sympathy, or if any of this registered as important to him at all. At last, his voice broke the quiet. "How many months did you work there?" 8 months. "Were you aware of what kind of establishment it was when you accepted the position?" "I understood it was a nightclub. I understood it was not exactly—" She stopped, struggling to find the appropriate words to explain her choice. "I knew it was not the safest environment, but I desperately needed a job. And the management promised me that my only responsibility would be serving drinks. That was the only thing I ever consented to do. And you honored that agreement. I tried my best." "You succeeded," he corrected her, his tone firm. "That is the reason you are sitting in this vehicle right now." Olivia looked over at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I do not understand what you mean." He did not provide an immediate answer, choosing instead to observe her with those dark, inscrutable eyes. He then leaned forward, placing his elbows on his knees and clasping his hands together. "The Eclipse Lounge," he said with deliberate slowness, "is much more than just a nightclub. I know that." "No, you do not." His voice became even lower, more serious. "It serves as a front. Illicit money is moved through that building. Young women are moved through that building. Things that are never supposed to happen take place within those walls. And a specific person is supposed to be ensuring that they absolutely do not." Olivia's throat felt as if it were coated in sand. "Who is that person?" The man offered a smile that held absolutely no warmth or humor. "Me." That single word hung in the tense air between them like the edge of a knife. Olivia's fingers tightened their grip on her worn handbag. She still did not know who this man truly was, but she was suddenly beginning to comprehend why the vehicle was so luxurious. It explained why his suit was tailored so perfectly to his frame. It was the reason people likely gave him a wide berth when they saw him walking down the street. "You are the owner of the Eclipse," she whispered, the realization dawning on her. "I am the owner of many things," he replied, leaning back into his seat once more. "The Eclipse happens to be one of them." And if the story you are telling me is accurate, then it means someone has been operating my business as if it were his own personal property. It is accurate, Olivia said, her words rushing out. I promise you, I am not making this up. I am aware that you are not. How can you be so sure? He made a small gesture in her direction. Because you are still dressed in your work apron. Because you are soaked from the storm and crying and have absolutely no other place to turn. Because women who invent stories like this do not typically find themselves abandoned and walking alone in a downpour. The large vehicle began to slow its pace. Olivia peered out the window and felt a sickening lurch in the pit of her stomach. They had returned. The Eclipse Lounge loomed before them, a monument to her misery. Its neon signs cast shifting reflections of pink and blue across the wet, dark pavement. The deep thumping of the music was a faint but steady pulse felt through the walls. Small groups of people lingered near the entrance, sharing cigarettes and laughing, completely unaware of the drama unfolding. I cannot go back inside that place, Olivia pleaded, a wave of panic crashing over her. Please, that man will not touch you, the man said as he opened his car door. You will stay right beside me, and you will not say a word unless I instruct you to speak. What is the reason we are here? He gave her one final assessing look before he stepped out into the steady rain. Because I feel it is time I met the manager who believes he is in charge of my club. Olivia remained frozen in her seat. The man now stood just outside the sport utility vehicle, the rain beginning to darken the shoulders of his expensive suit, waiting for her. The passenger door was still hanging open. The music from the club seemed to bleed into the night air, its bass line heavy and relentless. It was the kind of overwhelming sound designed to swallow conversations that people preferred not to have overheard. I cannot, she repeated, her voice much quieter this time, almost a whisper. He leaned back down, resting one hand on the doorframe, to look at her directly. You can do this, and you are going to, he insisted. He will see me in there. He will not do a single thing. The absolute certainty in his tone was unshakable. Not when you are with me. Olivia's hands were trembling as she clutched her bag. Every single one of her instincts was screaming at her to remain in the safety of the car, to beg the driver to take her anywhere else in the city, to simply vanish into the rainy night and never return. But she knew she had already sealed her fate the moment she accepted his offer and got inside. She had already placed her trust in this complete stranger with the hard, unforgiving eyes and the voice that carried quiet threats. She finally swung her legs out and stepped onto the wet pavement. The man shut the door firmly behind her and immediately began walking toward the club's main entrance. Olivia had to hurry to match his long strides, her drenched sneakers making splashing sounds in the puddles. The work apron was still tied securely around her waist, feeling like a badge of her recent humiliation. She felt completely exposed, certain that every person smoking by the door would recognize her as the young woman who had been unceremoniously thrown out just an hour before. But not a single person even glanced in her direction. Instead, they all stared at him. The casual conversations near the entrance faltered and died in the middle of sentences. Cigarettes were frozen halfway to parted lips. A woman dressed in a skin-tight red dress instinctively took a half-step backward to create more space. The pair of security guards stationed at the door, both of them large men covered in tattoos, who usually looked as immovable as statues, snapped to attention. "Senor Race," one of them said, his voice strained and tight. The man, Race, offered no acknowledgement. He simply strode past them as if they were nothing more than pieces of furniture. Olivia followed closely in his wake, her head bowed, her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. The guards did not make a move to stop her. They did not even seem to register her presence. Their intense focus remained locked on Race until the moment he vanished through the club's entrance. Once inside, the music was no longer just a sound. It was a physical force. It pressed down on Olivia's chest and vibrated deep within her bones, making it difficult to form a coherent thought. The club was crowded with a sea of writhing bodies on the dance floor. Strobe lights sliced through clouds of artificial fog. Bartenders moved with frantic speed behind the long, polished marble counter where she had spent the last 8 months of her life, the very same counter where she had been told her work was no longer good enough. Race moved through the dense crowd like a great shark navigating through open water. People instinctively shifted aside, creating a path for him without even being consciously aware that they were doing it. Some deep-seated instinct warned them to clear his way. Olivia remained glued to his side, the damp fabric of her uniform clinging unpleasantly to her skin, her handbag held tightly against her chest like a shield. She recognized familiar faces in the crowd, other girls she had shared shifts with, regular customers she had served countless drinks to. Not one of them would meet her gaze. It was as if they either did not recognize her at all, or they were actively choosing to pretend that they did not. And then, across the room, she saw him. Senor. He was standing near the velvet ropes of the VIP section, sharing a laugh with a woman draped in a shimmering gold dress. He was tall and possessed a kind of practiced, artificial handsomeness. He wore a tailored black suit that was clearly too well made to have been purchased from a department store. His dark hair was slicked back from his face, and his smile was effortless and supremely confident. He was a man who fully believed that the world would always bend to his desires, simply because it always had. He had not spotted them yet. Race paused at the edge of the dance floor, casually placing his hands in his pockets. He scanned the entire club with the detached expression of a man inspecting a piece of property he had almost forgotten he owned. His jaw was set in a hard line. His eyes moved with methodical precision, sweeping from the busy bar to the exclusive VIP section, and then to the back hallway where the private rooms were located. "Which one is he?" he asked, his voice low, not even bothering to look down at Olivia. She did not need to ask him what he was referring to. Her throat felt raw, like it was lined with sandpaper. "He is the one in the black suit, standing by the couches." Race gave a slow, deliberate nod. "You will stay directly behind me." He began to move again. Olivia's heart rate surged. This was actually unfolding. This nightmare was becoming real. A part of her desperately wanted to reach out and grab his arm, to tell him that she had changed her mind, that they could simply walk out and leave. She wanted to say that confronting Senor would not solve anything, but her feet continued to move, as if they had a will of their own, carrying her through the throngs of people toward the very man who had tossed her out into the rain as if she were garbage. Senor finally noticed them when they were about 10 feet away. His easy smile did not waver in the slightest. If anything, it seemed to grow even wider. He politely excused himself from the woman in the gold dress and took a step forward, spreading his arms in a gesture of warm welcome. "Can I help you this evening?" he asked, his voice as smooth and practiced as a recording. He still had not recognized Olivia. His entire focus was on Race, his mind clearly working to identify this important-looking stranger. Race came to a complete stop directly in front of him. "You are in charge of this club?" "I am the manager." "Yes." Senor's smile became entirely professional. "Are you gentlemen looking for a table?" "I am afraid the VIP section is at capacity tonight, but I might be able to." "I am not looking for a table." There was something in Race's tone, a cold edge that made Senor finally pause. His smile remained fixed in place, but his eyes sharpened with sudden alertness. "Then what is it I can do for you? You can start by telling me precisely who gave you the authority to terminate my employees." The practiced smile finally cracked and fell away. Senor's gaze flickered for a brief moment to Olivia, standing behind Race, and then snapped back. Recognition began to dawn in his eyes, followed quickly by a wave of complete confusion. "I am sorry. I do not— Who are you?" "Camilo Race." The name landed with the force of a physical impact. All the color drained from Senor's face, leaving it a sickly shade of white. The swaggering confidence evaporated from him so rapidly that Olivia almost found herself feeling a flicker of pity for him. Almost. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened once more, but no sound came out. Senor Race, I had no idea you were. You had no idea I was coming, Camillo stated, his voice low and final. That is the real problem here. Of course it is. Senor straightened his spine, desperately trying to reassemble his mask of professional control. Of course. I only meant to say. His eyes darted across the vibrant, noisy club, searching for any ally, any support, but found none. Is something the matter? Has someone made a complaint against my management? Yes, I can promise you, whatever the issue is, I am more than capable of fixing it. Her. Camillo's head tilted slightly toward Olivia, but his intense gaze never left Senor. Tell me why she is no longer working. For the first time, Senor actually looked at the young woman beside the owner. He truly saw her. A storm of emotions crossed his face in an instant. First came surprise, then a flicker of irritation, followed by a wave of anger, which finally crashed into a sea of panic as he fully processed who she was standing next to. He began, clearing his throat to buy a moment. She was simply not a good fit for our team culture. And why was that? She was unwilling to take on certain additional responsibilities. What kind of responsibilities? Senor faltered. The heavy beat of the music seemed to pound in time with Olivia's heart. All around them, people were beginning to notice the charged conversation, the palpable and rising tension. The woman dressed in shimmering gold had vanished from her spot at the bar. Two of the bartenders had stopped pouring drinks, their complete attention fixed on the confrontation. The club provides more than just beverages, Senor explained with extreme caution. We offer a full range of entertainment, certain premium services for our most premium clients. She expressed no interest in participating in those ventures. She is a waitress, Camillo said, his voice completely flat and devoid of emotion. She was hired as a waitress. Her signed contract explicitly specified the duties of a waitress. Senor blinked, momentarily stunned. Yes, of course, but… So you terminated her employment for refusing to violate the terms of her own contract. It is not nearly that simple, he insisted. It is precisely that simple. Camillo's voice never rose, yet it sliced through the club's loud music like a razor-sharp knife. You applied pressure to an employee, expecting her to provide services of a sexual nature. When she refused, you evicted her. You threw her belongings and her person onto the street without any severance pay, and with absolutely no warning. Is that an accurate summary of events? Senor's jaw tightened and worked silently. With all due respect, Senor Ree, you clearly do not understand the mechanics of how this particular business operates. I understand it perfectly. Camillo took a single, deliberate step closer to him. What I fail to understand is who, precisely, told you that this conduct was acceptable. No one had to tell me. I operate the club in the manner it needs to be run, the way that ensures it makes a profit. My profit. Yes, your profit, Camillo agreed, his voice dangerously soft. The money I have been helping you increase every single month, which you earned by exploiting young women who came to the city to work, not to be put up for sale. The raw accusation hung heavy and suffocating in the air between them. Senor's face flushed a deep, mottled red. That is completely untrue. These girls are fully aware of what they are getting into. They want this kind of work. They earn very good money doing it. She is the only one who has ever raised a complaint, because she is the only one who had the courage to say no. She is the only one naive enough to believe that a place like this could possibly survive by just serving cocktails. The words tumbled out, sharp and defensive, and the very instant they left his mouth, Senor seemed to grasp the magnitude of his mistake. His eyes widened in horror. He instinctively took a half-step backward, away from the impending storm. Camillo's cold expression did not shift in the slightest. Turn the music off. What did you say? Turn the music off, now! Senor glanced around in a state of desperation, then frantically signaled to someone Olivia could not see from her vantage point. 10 seconds later, the powerful music abruptly cut out. The ensuing silence was absolutely deafening. Every single head in the packed club swiveled in their direction. Camillo raised his voice just enough for it to carry across the now silent room. Everybody needs to get out now. For a moment, no one moved a muscle. The crowd just stared at Camillo as if he had spoken in a language none of them could possibly comprehend. A ghost of the beat that had been vibrating through the walls only moments before still echoed faintly from the massive speakers. Someone near the bar let out a nervous laugh. A glass clinked against a table. Camillo did not bother to repeat his order. He calmly pulled his phone from his pocket, pressed a single button, and lifted it to his ear. His eyes remained locked on Señor's terrified face. "Clear the entire building," he said into the phone in flawless Portuguese. "I want everyone out. You have 2 minutes." He ended the call without another word. That was the moment when people began to understand what was truly happening. The security team appeared first, but not the 2 guards from the front entrance. These were different men, at least 6 of them, perhaps even more. They materialized from the darkened corners of the club, as if they had been waiting in the shadows for this specific command. They moved through the crowd with a chilling efficiency, their actions entirely professional. They ushered patrons toward the exits with voices that were firm and hands that were even firmer. "Let's go, people. It is time to leave. The club is now closed for the night. Everyone out. You need to move." The crowd showed some resistance at first. There were confused complaints and protests. Half-finished drinks were left abandoned on the tables. A few angry voices shouted out, but the guards were not there to negotiate. Within 60 seconds, the entire dance floor was emptying out. Within 90 seconds, the bar area was completely clear. The woman who had been dressed in gold snatched her purse and hurried for the door, never once looking back. Olivia stood frozen in place beside Camillo, watching the club drain of people like water swirling out of a bathtub. Girls she had worked alongside filed past her, some still in their simple waitress uniforms, while others wore the skimpy, revealing outfits Senor insisted upon for his premium entertainment. A few of them cast a quick glance in her direction. Most of them did not. Senor's panic was now raw and visible to everyone. His hands twitched uncontrollably at his sides. Beads of sweat formed along his hairline, despite the building's powerful air conditioning. "Senor Ree, please, I beg you, if I have offended you in any way, be quiet." Senor's mouth snapped shut with an audible click. The last of the customers were filtered out the doors. The guards immediately took up positions at every exit, crossing their arms over their chests, their expressions completely blank and unreadable. One of the men locked the large front door from the inside. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed loudly through the now silent, empty club. Camillo calmly surveyed the space, taking in the scattered, abandoned glasses, the fog machine that was still pumping a fine mist across the dance floor, and the neon lights reflecting off the many mirrors and chrome fixtures. He began to walk slowly toward the bar, his hands still casually tucked in his pockets, absorbing every single detail of the scene. Olivia followed him, simply because she had no idea what else she was supposed to do. Behind them, Senor remained rooted to the spot where they had left him, his bravado and confidence now completely shattered. Camillo came to a stop at the bar, running a single finger along the smooth, cool marble countertop. "How much revenue does this establishment generate in a single month?" Senor stammered out his reply. "Approximately 200,000 reais, though sometimes it is more depending on the season. And what portion of that comes directly from liquor sales?" There was only silence. "How much?" Camillo repeated, his tone unchanged. "Perhaps 30%. So, that means 70% of your income is generated by the girls." Senor swallowed with great difficulty. "The entertainment services are exceptionally popular. We cater to high-end clients. Discretion is always guaranteed. It has proven to be a very lucrative business model." I was not asking you for a sales pitch. Camillo turned to face him fully, his eyes like ice. I was asking you for the numbers. Is it 70%? Yes, that is the approximate figure. And tell me, what percentage of that do you pay the girls? 20% of whatever they earn, plus they keep their tips. 20% of the money they make for you by selling their bodies. They are classified as independent contractors, he insisted. They have the right to choose their own clients. They are allowed to set their own personal boundaries. Everything that happens is completely consensual. Camillo's laugh was a cold, empty sound. Except for when it is not. Except for when one of the girls says no, and then you throw her out into the street. She was not even one of the entertainers. She was just... She was an employee, Camillo interrupted, who had a signed contract, who performed her job, and who you then punished for refusing to do a different job that she never, ever agreed to do. Camillo stepped even closer. Where is her room? It is upstairs, on the second floor. But all of her personal belongings are... Show me. Senor looked as though he was about to be physically sick. Of course, he choked out. It is right this way. He led them toward the back hallway, moving past the restrooms and the main storage room, until they reached a narrow staircase that Olivia knew far too well. She had climbed those very stairs every single night for the past 8 months, feeling exhausted and with her body aching, just feeling grateful to have a door that she could lock behind her. The second floor was much quieter and dimmer than the club below. It was just a long, narrow corridor with a series of doors on either side. Some of them were open, revealing tiny rooms that were barely large enough to hold a single bed. Other doors were closed, with muffled sounds filtering through them. Faint voices, quiet music, and the rhythmic, unmistakable creak of bed frames. A tight knot formed in Olivia's chest. She had lived right next to all of this. She had heard these sounds every single night. Senor stopped in front of a door located near the far end of the hall. This one was hers. Open it, Camillo commanded. Senor fumbled with a large keyring, selected one of the keys, and unlocked the door. It swung inward to reveal the room. It was completely empty. It was not just empty of Olivia's few possessions. It had been totally stripped bare. The mattress was gone from the bed frame. The lamp was gone. Even the simple curtain rod above the window had been removed. There was nothing left but bare walls and a cold concrete floor. Where is her stuff? Camillo's tone became unnervingly calm. I had her things removed, he said, the words barely a whisper. It is the standard process when an employee is let go. Camillo pressed him. And where are her possessions at this moment? They are in the storage room, downstairs. I can go and get them for you. Camillo's eyes narrowed. You dismissed her with absolutely nothing? She left with a bag. I watched her leave with it. Just a single bag. That was all she had to show for 8 long months of her life. A single bag. Camillo shifted his gaze to Olivia. Is what he is saying correct? She could only manage a nod, her voice caught in her throat. He looked at the barren room for what felt like an eternity, his silence filling the space. Then, he stepped back into the corridor, took out his phone, and dialed a number. I require a complete audit, he commanded. At the Eclipse Lounge, starting this evening. I want to see every single contract, every transaction, and a list of every woman currently employed here. I need their names, their ages, how long they have worked here, and the exact terms they agreed to when they were hired. He went silent, absorbing the response from the other end. No, I am not leaving. Assemble the team immediately. After ending the conversation, his eyes locked onto Senor. You will go downstairs, you will sit, and you will respond to every single question they have for you. And if my investigation uncovers that you have been involved with underage girls or forcing women into this work, no one will ever find what is left of you. The color drained from Senor's face, leaving it a sickly gray. I promise you, every person here is of legal age. They all provide their consent. I am running a legitimate establishment. You run absolutely nothing. Camillo's voice was as cold as a frozen lake. You are a simple manager who has forgotten his place. And you are about to receive a harsh lesson about the consequences of abusing your authority. He signaled to one of his guards. Escort him to the office downstairs. Secure him inside. He is not to leave that room. He is not to use a phone. He is not to speak with a single soul until my team gets here. Yes, senor, the guard responded, taking a firm hold of Senor's arm. For a moment, it looked like Senor would argue, but the thought died before it could become words. His body went limp, his shoulders sagged, and all the resistance vanished as he was guided away. Once the two of them were alone in the quiet corridor, Camillo's attention finally turned to Olivia. You endured this for 8 months? She simply nodded, the answer clear in her eyes. Having to hear all of that every single night? His gesture indicated the closed doors lining the hall. Yes, she managed to say, her voice trembling and breaking. And through all of it, I kept telling him no, I am not one of them. I am not that kind of girl. I am only a waitress. You are so much more than that, he stated, his tone matter of fact, as if he were declaring a universal truth. Most individuals in your position would have surrendered, but you did not. Olivia was at a loss for words. A profound emptiness washed over her, as if she had been completely drained of all emotion. The events of the last 2 hours seemed like a waking dream. The relentless rain, the imposing vehicle, the intense confrontation. Seeing Senor completely fall apart before the very man he had been betraying was unbelievable. What is going to happen now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Camillo glanced down the long hallway and then met her gaze again. Now, I will handle this disaster, and you will have to determine what it is you truly desire. What I desire? She repeated, confused. You can no longer remain here. Your room is no longer yours, and your position has been eliminated. However, you are entitled to 8 months of pay for the duties you would not perform, along with a payment for wrongful dismissal, and additional damages for the emotional hardship you endured. He took out his phone and quickly typed, Let us round it to 50,000 reais. The amount was so staggering that Olivia felt her legs threaten to give way beneath her. You can take the 50,000, he went on, or you have another option. You can stay. You can assist me in discovering who else has been victimized in this establishment. If it becomes necessary, you will provide a statement, and I will personally guarantee your safety throughout the entire process. She looked at him in disbelief. Why would you offer me something like that? Because in this entire place, he said, his eyes locking with hers, you are the single individual who has been honest. And I must understand the full extent of this corruption. In the distance, a clap of thunder echoed through the night. In that moment, Olivia came to a decision. I will help you. Camillo gave a single, decisive nod. Then we should head back down. My team will be arriving shortly, and I expect you to share every single detail with them. The manager's office was more confined than Olivia had imagined. Senor was seated behind a messy desk, his hands clasped before him, his face a mask of pale fear. A pair of guards were positioned by the door, their arms folded and their faces emotionless, like statues. The air in the room was thick with the scent of old cigarette smoke and pricey whiskey, where a partially consumed bottle reflected the glow from the desk lamp. Camillo stood by the window, his back to the room, watching the street below, where a convoy of dark cars was pulling up to the curb. These were his people, the auditors he had summoned. Through the window, Olivia watched them emerge. They were men and women dressed in professional dark suits, carrying laptops and document cases, and they moved with a disciplined purpose that reminded her of an army. She was sitting on a simple metal chair facing Senor, the damp fabric of her uniform clinging to her skin. Her apron was still tied around her waist, a constant reminder of her humiliation. At her feet was the bag that contained every single one of her worldly possessions. For 5 full minutes, Camillo had remained completely silent. The quiet was more terrifying than any yelling could have been. It filled the room with an oppressive heaviness that made it hard to draw a full breath. Señor's eyes kept darting toward Camillo, then quickly looking away, searching for some sign, some permission to talk, or to offer an excuse. At long last, Camillo moved away from the window. "How many years have you been in my employment?" he inquired. Señor nervously cleared his throat. "It has been 3 years, Señor Reyes." "And during those 3 years," Camillo continued, "how many occasions have I personally come to this establishment?" This would be the first time. Camillo allowed that admission to hang in the air. "So, you operated under the assumption that I was indifferent to what transpired here?" "No, not at all," Señor stammered. "I simply believed I was fulfilling your expectations. I was increasing revenue, expanding the enterprise by transforming it into a house of ill repute." "It is not a house of ill repute," Señor retorted instantly. "It is an exclusive gentleman's lounge that offers extra amenities. It is upscale, confidential, and entirely within the law." "Within the law?" Camillo's voice was completely devoid of emotion. "You continue to use that term, but what is legal is not always what is right, and it certainly does not mean it was approved by me. I was granted autonomy over the operations. The former regional director told me—" "I am not interested in what he told you," Camillo interrupted, pushing himself away from the wall and approaching the desk. "I am interested in what you have done. Tell me, how many women are presently engaged in work in the rooms upstairs?" Señor paused, reluctant to answer. 15. Perhaps 16. "You are not certain?" "Some are transient. They work for themselves." "How many are bound by a contract similar to hers?" Camillo motioned with his head toward Olivia. "How many were brought on as waitstaff only to be coerced into providing other services?" Silence filled the room. "How many?" Camillo's hand struck the desk. The impact was not loud, but it was sudden and sharp, causing Señor to jump. "I cannot say for certain. A small number, maybe 5 or 6, began as regular employees, and then moved into other roles." "Moved into other roles," Camillo echoed, the words dripping with sarcasm. What a delicate way to phrase it. "They desired that kind of work," Señor insisted. "The compensation is significantly higher. I never compelled anyone." Olivia's fingers tightened into fists in her lap. The deception was so effortless, so well rehearsed, that it seemed he had repeated it enough times to convince even himself of its truth. "She is right in front of you," Camillo said softly, "and she will immediately let me know if you are being dishonest." Señor's gaze shot to Olivia, and she met it without flinching. "There were more," she declared, her voice resonating with a newfound confidence. "It was not just me. I remember a woman named Beatrice. We were both bartenders for about 2 months, and then, suddenly, she was working in the upstairs rooms. When I questioned her about it, she told me she was given no other option." "That is a complete fabrication," Señor interrupted. "Beatrice approached me directly and requested more hours. I presented her with a chance to earn more, and she took it." "I found her weeping in the restroom the following week," Olivia pressed on. "She told me she was desperate for the money because you had informed her that the bar was not generating enough in tips to justify keeping her as a full-time employee unless she was willing to assist upstairs. That is a distortion of the facts." "Is this Beatrice currently employed here?" Camillo demanded. "No," Señor conceded. "She departed roughly a month ago." "Did she depart, or was she terminated?" "She simply ceased coming to work." A muscle in Camillo's jaw clenched. He retrieved his phone, entered a quick message, and then addressed one of the guards. "I want you to locate her. Get me her complete name, her last known residence, and her phone number. I intend to speak with her this evening." The guard acknowledged the order and left the room. Camillo's focus returned to Señor. "Who else was there?" "I am not sure what you—" Who else did you manipulate? He pressed. Who else accepted a legitimate job here only to be pushed into those rooms with threats against their employment? No one else, Senor insisted. I swear to you, all the others were fully aware of what they were getting into. Then you should have no objection to me asking them myself. Camillo started walking toward the door. Because my people are preparing to question every single woman in this establishment, and if just one of them shares a narrative that resembles hers, he motioned to Olivia, then you and I will be having a far more extensive discussion in a location that is significantly less pleasant. That was the final blow. Senor's self-control shattered into a million pieces. Please, Senor Reyes, he begged. My only goal was to operate a successful enterprise. The expenses for this location are staggering. The cost of the liquor permit by itself is— I have no interest in your expenses, Camillo cut him off. What I am interested in is the fact that you utilized my capital, my establishment, and my reputation to take advantage of women who believed you would uphold their employment agreements. It was not taking advantage. She would have been on the streets tonight. Camillo's voice was sharp enough to draw blood. Wandering in a storm with no place to sleep because you ejected her for declining to sell her body. That is not how business is conducted. That is simple cruelty. The words seemed to linger in the room, heavy and undeniable. Olivia experienced a profound change within herself. Finally, someone was articulating the truth. Someone was identifying his actions for what they truly were. For 8 months, she had been dismissed as naive, told she failed to grasp the realities of life, and that her personal limits were impractical. Now, at last, someone was affirming that she had been correct all along. A rap on the door broke the tense silence. A guard opened it to admit a woman dressed in a smart gray suit, holding a digital tablet and a professional portfolio. She appeared to be in her 50s, with stylishly short silver hair and an intelligent gaze that quickly assessed everyone in the room. Senor Reyes, she acknowledged with a respectful nod. Gabriela, Camillo replied, his posture becoming more formal. Give me an update. We have taken possession of all relevant documents, including financial statements, employee contracts, and all security recordings from the last 6 months, she reported crisply. All of the women are currently being questioned individually in private rooms. We have also reached out to our legal team and the appropriate local agencies to make certain that this entire process is meticulously recorded. Excellent, he said. What is the total number of women involved? There are 23 currently on the premises. Of the premises, 19 of them are over the age of 18. 4 of them. She glanced up at Senor, indicating that there were discrepancies in their legal documentation. Camillo's expression grew even darker. What sort of discrepancies are we talking about? Identification cards that do not appear to match their stated ages. For example, one girl is claiming to be 22 years old, but we found a birth certificate that suggests she is actually only 17. The temperature in the entire room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Camillo turned his body slowly to face Senor. You have been hiring minors. No, that is not true. No, I checked every single one of their identification cards myself. If someone lied to me about their age, that is not my fault. You failed to verify. It was not a question. It was a final judgment. I did verify everything. I have copies of all of their documents. If someone brought me a fake ID card, I had no way of knowing it was fraudulent. You failed to verify, Camillo repeated, his voice dangerously low. Because you did not want to know the truth. Senor opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, then opened it again. Not a single word came out. Gabriela cleared her throat softly. Should I immediately contact the authorities regarding the minors and arrange to get them somewhere safe? Yes. I want medical exams, counseling, whatever they might need. I want a full paper trail created showing everything. From the moment we found the issue, we offered our full cooperation. Camillo nodded. He understood. As the woman left, the sound of her heels echoed down the empty corridor. His gaze shifted to Olivia. Were you aware of the younger ones being here? I had my suspicions, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. There was one girl who just seemed far too young for this place. I asked her about her age once. She told me she was 19, but the way she said it, her eyes told a completely different story. She was clearly lying. Did you ever report what you saw? And who would I report it to? He was the one who ran this club. Her hand gestured weakly toward Senor. I was fighting every single day just to keep my own job. Camilo gave a slow, understanding nod. You did everything you could do in your situation. I feel like I should have done something more. You made it through. That in itself is more than enough. He walked toward the door but stopped just before leaving. I am going to need you to write down every single thing you can recall. Every girl you remember who seemed forced to be here. Every conversation, every threat, every last detail. Of course, Gabriella will be here to assist you. Don't rush. Be as thorough as you possibly can. He cast one final cold look at Senor. And after that, we are going to make sure this place is shut down for good. The color drained completely from Senor's face. You cannot do this. This particular location generates significant. I do not care what it generates. It is over tonight. The interviews lasted for 4 grueling hours. Olivia found herself in a small office just off the main hall with Gabriella, forcing her hand to document everything she could possibly remember. She wrote down names and described faces. She recalled conversations she had overheard in hushed tones in bathrooms and on back stairwells. She remembered the girls who had first arrived full of hope, only to leave completely broken. She thought of the girls who had to smile while tears streamed down their faces, and the ones who eventually stopped smiling at all. Her hand began to cramp after the first hour passed, but she pushed through the pain and kept writing. Gabriella would ask questions to gently guide her memory, clarifying a detail here and there, asking about timelines. She made notes on her tablet with quick practice taps of her fingers. She never interrupted Olivia unnecessarily, and she never rushed the process. She just listened with the intense focus of someone who had heard stories like this many times before. From outside the room, Olivia could hear the sounds of constant movement, doors opening and closing, the low murmur of conversations, and the quiet, orderly shuffle of people being led through the building. Every single one of the girls was being interviewed, each one in a separate room. Each girl was assigned to a different member of Camilo's team. Nobody was permitted to leave the premises until after they had provided a complete statement. Sometime around midnight, Gabriella's phone vibrated on the table. She looked down at the screen, then pushed her chair back and stood up. I need to go check on something important. Please continue writing. I will return shortly. Olivia simply nodded, flexing her aching fingers before she picked up the pen once more. She wrote about Beatrice, a girl who had broken down crying in the bathroom one night and then vanished a month later. She wrote about Carla, who had been brought on as a cocktail waitress but now served the VIP rooms with empty eyes and a smile that looked painted on. She wrote about the girl whose name she never even learned, the one who looked no older than 16 but swore up and down that she was 19. She described the night Senor had trapped her in the darkness of the storage room. His voice had been friendly, but his intention was perfectly clear. You could be making 3 times what you earn now. Our customers ask about you. You are wasting your potential here. She wrote about how his entire demeanor changed after she had turned him down. She explained how her shifts suddenly became longer, how her tips began to mysteriously shrink, how the other staff members started to avoid her as if her rejection of him was some kind of contagious disease. She wrote about the other girls who had tried to give her warnings. Just give him what he wants. It is so much easier that way. If you fight back, it only makes things worse for you. She wrote until her hand trembled uncontrollably and the words on the page started to blur. Gabriella finally came back into the room holding a cup of coffee and a sandwich that Olivia had no memory of asking for. You need to eat, Gabriella said, her voice soft. You have been focused on this for many hours now. Olivia gratefully took the hot coffee, but knew she could not handle the food. How many of the girls have you managed to speak with so far? We have interviewed 17 of them. There are 6 more left to talk to. Gabriella's face grew tense. And it turns out you were not the only one he targeted. You were not even close. Hearing that confirmation should have made Olivia feel a sense of justice, but instead, it just left her feeling exhausted, heartbroken, and angry with herself for not finding a way to do more when she first had the chance. "What about the young ones?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "All 4 of them are being moved to a secure safe house tonight. They will have full medical exams tomorrow morning. We have already managed to contact their families where it was possible." Gabriella took a short breath. 2 of the girls are not from this state. They were lured here from online ads that promised them careers in modeling. Olivia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Modeling was the classic language used by traffickers. The girls arrive, full of hope. Their passports are taken from them for so-called safekeeping. Then, all of a sudden, they are told they owe a massive debt for housing and transportation that they never agreed to in the first place. Gabriella's voice remained clinical and professional, but Olivia could feel the rage simmering just below the surface. By the time they figure out what is really happening to them, they are completely trapped. Did Senor know about any of this? He claims that he had no idea. But ignorance is not a valid defense when you are the one running an operation of this nature. He absolutely should have known. He simply made the choice not to look. The door swung open. Camillo came inside. He was still in the same suit, though his shirt was more creased now, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. He looked deeply tired, but it was not a physical exhaustion. It was something that ran much deeper, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from witnessing things that you can never unsee. "How is she doing?" he asked, looking at Gabriella. "She has been extremely thorough. We have more than enough to build a very strong case against him." He nodded his approval, then turned his gaze to Olivia. "I am going to need you to come with me now." Her heart began to beat faster. "Where are we going?" "We are going upstairs. One of the younger girls is refusing to say a word unless you are in the room with her." Olivia placed her pen on the table. "Which girl is it?" "She would not give us her name. She only said that she knew you and that you had always been kind to her." Olivia rose to her feet, her legs feeling stiff from sitting for so many hours. She followed Camillo as he led her out of the small room and down the main hallway. They walked past security guards and members of an audit team who were moving methodically through the building, like surgeons carefully cutting away at a dangerous infection. They took the back staircase that led up to the second floor. The hallway up here felt completely different now. It was empty and eerily quiet. The doors to the rooms stood wide open, showing rooms in different states of disarray. There were unmade beds, clothes scattered across the floor, and makeup kits left abandoned on the nightstands. All of the girls had been taken downstairs for their interviews. What was left behind now felt like evidence at a crime scene, silent proof of what this establishment truly was. Camilo came to a stop at a door near the end of the hall, just 3 doors down from where Olivia's own room used to be. He knocked very gently on the door. "It is me. I have brought her with me." There was a brief moment of silence, and then they heard a small voice from inside. "Okay." Camilo opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, sitting on the very edge of a narrow bed, was a girl Olivia recognized in an instant. She had a young face, and her dark hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. She was wearing an oversized sweatshirt that was definitely not part of "So what is this really about?" Olivia directed her gaze toward Camo. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, granting her the permission to speak the unvarnished truth. "This is about making certain that what I went through never happens to another person," Olivia stated clearly. "We are building a case against Senor. He is being investigated for exploiting his workers, for coercing young women into situations they never consented to, and for cultivating a dangerously unsafe environment. We have to know who else he has harmed." Lucia's fingers nervously intertwined in her lap. "I was not harmed." I chose to do this. Did you really choose? Olivia asked, her voice soft and understanding. Or did you simply choose a waitressing job and find yourself trapped here, with every other door closed to you? A heavy silence filled the space between them. Then, in a quiet voice, Lucia admitted, "He told me I was not earning enough in tips. He said I was a financial drain on the club, and that if I wanted to keep my job, I had to start contributing in a different way." When did this conversation happen? 2 months ago. It was right after you began turning down the requests for the private VIP rooms. Lucia finally looked up, her eyes overflowing with tears. I saw what he did to you. I watched how he treated you after you told him no. And so, when he finally approached me with the same demand, I did not resist. I did not argue. I just said yes. A knot formed in Olivia's throat. I am so incredibly sorry. None of this is your fault. What you did was courageous. I was not brave, Lucia whispered. I had to have this job. The money was essential. My mother is unwell, and I have to send part of my earnings home to her every single week. If I were to lose this position, I honestly do not know what would have become of me. Where is your home? Camo asked, his tone even and calm. I am from Bahia, a very small town. There are no jobs there. That is the reason I moved to the city in the first place. And Senor was aware of your situation. Lucia nodded, confirming his suspicion. He knew everyone's story. He understood exactly who was desperate, who was buried in debt, and who simply could not afford to refuse him. Her voice fell to a nearly inaudible whisper. That was his method for choosing his victims. The room became utterly still. Camillo took out his phone and typed a short message. When he looked up again, his voice was measured and deliberate. Lucia, I need to ask you an important question, and I need you to answer with complete honesty. Did Senor, or any other person at this club, ever use physical force to make you do something against your will? Number. Not direct force, but what? But he made it absolutely clear that refusal was not a genuine option. He made sure we all knew that the girls who refused to cooperate did not work here for very long. I witnessed what happened to the ones who attempted to quit before their contract was up. He would withhold their final pay. Their professional references would suddenly vanish. One woman tried to file a report against him, and overnight, she found it impossible to get a job anywhere in this city. He had her completely blacklisted. I do not know what the proper term is for that. I only know that she was forced to return to her hometown with absolutely nothing to show for her time here. Camillo's jaw hardened into a tight line. He glanced over at Olivia. Were you aware of any of this? I had heard some rumors, but I never had any concrete proof. He nodded slowly, his attention returning to Lucia. I am going to need you to write down everything you have just shared with me. Include the names of any other women who were pressured, any clients who were abusive, and anyone who you know helped Senor manage this entire scheme. Are you able to do that for us? Lucia paused, her fear evident. What will happen to me after I do this? After you do this establishment will be closed down for good. Senor will face serious legal consequences, and you will receive all the money you are owed, along with substantial compensation for what you were forced to endure. And after that? What am I supposed to do then? You can go anywhere you desire. I will personally guarantee that you have more than enough to build a new life for yourself, somewhere secure and a long way from this place. Lucia's eyes shifted to Olivia, seeking reassurance. Do you trust him? Olivia thought about the completely deserted club on the floor below them. She remembered the professional audit team that had swept in. She recalled the way Camo had systematically shattered Senor's confidence in a matter of minutes. And she thought about how he had stopped his car in a downpour for a total stranger who had absolutely nothing to give him in return. Yes, she said with certainty. I trust him. Lucia drew in a long, unsteady breath. All right. I will write everything down. By 3 o'clock in the morning, the Eclipse Lounge resembled the scene of a serious crime. This was not because of any violence. There had been none, but because of the sheer volume of corruption the investigation had brought to light. Boxes filled with files now lined the corridor outside of Señor's office. The faint glow of laptop screens illuminated every flat surface. Gabriella's team moved with a quiet, intense focus, meticulously cross-referencing documents, flagging every inconsistency, and constructing an airtight case that would be impossible to defeat in court. Olivia sat alone in the main lounge area, a silent witness to the entire operation. The vibrant neon lights had all been switched off, and the fog machine was finally quiet. Without the pulsing music, the dense crowds, and the fabricated atmosphere of excitement, the room seemed much smaller and more desolate, like an empty stage long after a performance has concluded. Camo was standing near the bar, his phone pressed firmly against his ear. He was speaking in rapid-fire Portuguese to someone on the other end who was clearly unhappy with what they were hearing. His voice remained calm, but was completely inflexible. This is final. I do not care what the projected revenue was. I do not care what you gave your approval for 3 years ago. This entire operation is terminated tonight. No, there will be no further discussion on this matter, because I am the owner of this building, and I am informing you that it is finished. He disconnected the call without bothering to wait for a reply. Gabriella approached him, holding a tablet. We have now finished all of the interviews. There were 23 women in total. 14 of them were originally hired under completely false pretenses, or were later coerced into providing services that were not part of their initial contracts. 4 of them are minors. The remaining 5 insist that they entered into the arrangement willingly, but 2 of those women are exhibiting clear signs that are consistent with trafficking indicators. What specific kind of indicators? Debt bondage. One of the women supposedly owes the club 30,000 reais for housing and training expenses that she swears she never consented to. Another woman had her passport taken from her the day she arrived from Colombia. She has not seen it since that day. Camo's expression grew even more grim. Where are their official documents? They were locked inside Señor's desk. We were able to recover 12 passports in total. Only 6 of them match the women who are currently employed here, and the other 6 passports are unaccounted for. They could belong to women who have already left, or it could be something much worse. The unspoken, terrible possibility hung in the air between them. Camo placed his phone on the bar. I want a complete forensic accounting of every single transaction for the past 3 years. Every payment made to the girls, every charge to a client, every single expense. If any money is missing, I demand to know where it ended up. That is already underway, Gabriella confirmed. But Señor was keeping 2 separate sets of books, one for official records and one that was hidden. We are currently working to break through the encrypted files as we speak. How much longer will it take? A few more hours, perhaps less. Camo gave a sharp nod. And what is the status of Señor? He is still in his office. He has demanded to speak with his lawyer. He can demand anything he likes. He is not leaving this building until my team has secured everything we need from him. Gabriella cast a quick glance at Olivia, and then her focus returned to Camo. There is something else that you need to be aware of. What is it? 3 of the women mentioned a regional manager. He visits the club once every month to collect cash payments, and he never reveals his name. They described him as an older man, always well-dressed, with a noticeable scar on his left hand. Camillo became completely motionless. Augusto. You are familiar with him? He was assigned to oversee all of the operations in this district. His job was to ensure that our locations remained clean, legal, and profitable. His voice was as cold as ice. Instead, it seems he was collecting protection money and intentionally ignoring what was happening. Should I add his name to the investigation? Add him to absolutely everything. I want to know about every single property he manages and every deal he has ever touched. I want to know every single person he has compromised. If he is allowing this to happen here, then he is allowing it to happen at other locations. Gabriella made a new note on her tablet. This is going to become much larger than just one club. I know, Camo said. He scanned the now empty room. That is precisely why this investigation has to be absolutely meticulous. If I simply clean up one location but ignore the rest of the network, I am only relocating the problem. My intention is to burn it all to the ground and then rebuild it the correct way. Olivia observed him from her seat across the room. This was clearly a man who had constructed an empire from scratch. She could see it in the efficient way his team moved, in the way they deferred to his judgment without a single question, and in the way one brief phone call could empty an entire building. But he was also the same man who had stopped his car in the middle of a rainstorm for a weeping woman he did not even know. She could not figure him out. And perhaps that was the entire point. Gabriella departed to coordinate with the forensics team. Camillo walked over to where Olivia was sitting, his hands tucked into his pockets. The deep exhaustion was finally starting to become visible around his eyes. You should go home now, he told her. I do not have a home. He stopped for a moment. Right. I had forgotten. It is all right. I can just wait here until… No. You have already provided us with everything we need. The work that remains is simply documentation. He took out his phone and typed something quickly. I am arranging for you to stay at a hotel. It will be clean and safe. You can get some rest. I do not need your charity. This is not charity. This is your payment for services rendered. For the last 6 hours, you have been working for me as a consultant. He turned the phone screen so she could see it. It was a confirmation of a bank transfer. 50,000 reais. That is the amount I promised you. I have also added another 20,000 for your assistance with the interviews tonight. Olivia could only stare at the number on the screen. 70,000 reais. That was more money than she had managed to earn in the last 2 years combined. I cannot possibly accept this. You already have. The transfer is complete. The money is in your account. What account? I never gave you my banking information. Gabriella retrieved your records from Senor's files. He put his phone back in his pocket. Consider that amount to be your back pay for the 8 months you spent enduring his abuse. Olivia's hands began to tremble. This is far too much. It is not nearly enough, he corrected her. But it is a beginning. He signaled to one of the security guards standing near the entrance. Raphael will escort you to the hotel. You can stay there for as long as you need to. When you feel ready to decide what you want to do next, you can call me. He offered her a business card. It was made of heavy, expensive paper with embossed lettering, showing only a name and a phone number. What if I decide not to call? Olivia asked, her voice quiet. Then you do not call. The money is yours regardless of your decision. You owe me absolutely nothing. Why are you doing all of this for me? Camillo studied her for a long, silent moment. Because you chose to walk away from everything you had rather than compromise the person you are. Most people do not possess that kind of strength. The few who do deserve to be protected, not punished for it. I am not special. You chose to walk through a storm with nowhere to go rather than sell a piece of yourself. In the world I live in, that makes you extraordinary. He took a small step back. Raphael will ensure you are taken care of. Get some proper sleep. We can talk tomorrow if you wish, or we can never speak again. The choice is completely yours. He started to leave, but then he paused. Camillo turned back to her. A question still hung in the air. What will happen to all the other girls? The ones who have no family, no place to call home? The same thing that is happening to you, he answered, his voice firm. They will receive money, secure housing, and any assistance they need. We will find them jobs if they want them, and therapy if they need it. Not a single one of them gets thrown out on the street. Not while I am in charge. Not ever again. And Senor? Olivia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Camillo's entire expression turned to stone. Senor is about to learn that stealing money from me is a very expensive mistake. He paused, his eyes dark with a cold fury. But stealing a woman's dignity… He let the thought hang in the air and slowly shook his head. That mistake is going to cost him absolutely everything. In that moment, Olivia believed every word. Raphael materialized at her side, a young professional presence in the same dark suit as all the other security men. "Are you ready, Senora?" She pushed herself to her feet, her legs stiff and unsteady from being seated for so long. Her work uniform was finally dry, but the fabric was creased and still carried the faint, sour smell of the club. She had a sudden, violent urge to burn it to ash. As Raphael guided her toward the main exit, Olivia risked one final look over her shoulder. Camillo was already standing at the bar, his phone pressed to his ear once more. He was giving orders that would send shockwaves through his entire network, commands that would dismantle deep-seated corruption, enforce unwavering accountability, and burn down everything that was rotten so that something new and better could rise from the ashes. He had pulled over for her in the pouring rain, but it was not because he was a kind man. Perhaps he was, in his own severe way, but his actions were driven by something else. He had standards. He had lines that he would never allow to be crossed. There were rules that even the most powerful men were required to follow. And when someone broke those rules, he did not simply look away. He took action. Outside, the downpour had finally ceased. The sky overhead was slowly starting to lighten. It was not quite dawn, but it was close. The city appeared transformed in the quiet pre-dawn gray, seeming calmer, almost serene. Raphael held open the door to a black sedan. It was not the same sport utility vehicle from before, but it was very similar. It looked clean, expensive, and completely safe. "The hotel is only 20 minutes from here," he informed her gently. "You can get some sleep in the car if you would like." Olivia slid into the plush back seat, placing her simple canvas bag beside her. Inside was an access card to an account holding 70,000 reais, an account she had hardly ever touched. As the car drove away from the Eclipse Lounge, she watched the building grow smaller and smaller in the side mirror. The glowing neon sign was now dark. The front doors were secured with heavy locks. Inside, Camillo's specialized team was systematically taking the entire place apart, piece by piece. By the next day, there would be nothing left of it. And Olivia Peters, who had been a waitress, a person who refused, and ultimately a survivor, would awaken in a fresh, clean bed with more than enough money to build a new life. She could go somewhere far away from this city, somewhere she could feel safe, somewhere she could finally choose for herself. Dawn broke over the sleeping city like a deep bruise, a mix of purple and gray that bled into a pale, watery yellow along the horizon. Olivia woke up in a hotel room that smelled of fresh lavender and clean linen. For a brief, peaceful moment, she could not remember where she was. Then, the memories from the night before came rushing back in a torrent. The relentless rain, the imposing sport utility vehicle, Camillo's face, half hidden in the deep shadows, the Eclipse Lounge being dismantled piece by piece. She sat up in bed and immediately checked her phone. It was 7:43 in the morning. She had missed calls from a number she did not recognize. There was also a text message from Gabriella. It read, "Investigation complete. Please call when you are awake." Olivia dialed the number immediately. Gabriella answered on the very first ring. "How did you sleep?" Gabriella asked. Olivia thought for a moment. "Better than I have slept in many months," she replied honestly. "Good. Are you able to come back to the club? There is something that Senor Reyes wants you to see." 20 minutes after that, Raphael was driving her back through the city's dense morning traffic. Everything looked different in the bright light of day, less threatening and more profoundly indifferent. It was just a place of concrete and glass, filled with people rushing to their jobs that would slowly drain the life from them. When they finally arrived at the location of the eclipse, Olivia could barely recognize the place. The entire neon sign was gone, leaving only empty metal brackets and a tangle of loose wires. The large front windows were completely covered with official-looking notices. There were citations, closure orders, and legal seizure documents. A small group of people had gathered on the sidewalk nearby, neighbors whispering behind their hands, all trying to understand what could have happened. Raphael guided her through a side entrance. Inside, the club was just a skeleton of its former self. The main bar had been completely stripped. All the bottles were removed, the glassware was packed away, and even the large mirrors had been taken down from the walls. The disc jockey booth was now empty, and the exclusive VIP section had been entirely dismantled. A team of workers in matching coveralls was busy pulling up the thick carpets, revealing the stained and damaged concrete floor that lay hidden underneath. Camillo stood right in the center of the dance floor, observing the widespread destruction like a military general surveying a battlefield after a long siege. He turned as soon as Olivia entered the room. "You came," he said. It was a statement, not a question. "Gabriella said you wanted to see me." "I wanted you to see all of this," he corrected her. He made a sweeping gesture that took in the entire gutted space. "So that you would know it is real. This place is not coming back." Olivia walked slowly across the room, past the empty bar where she had worked for 8 long months, past the hallway that led to the flight of stairs she had climbed every single night. Everything that had felt so solid and permanent just 12 hours before was now being systematically erased. "Where are the other girls?" she asked. "They are in safe houses and hotels. 3 of them have already gone home to their families. 2 others are scheduled to meet with social services this afternoon. The minors are now with Child Protection Services." He paused for a moment. "Lucia asked about you. She wanted to make sure that you were okay. I should call her." He nodded. "She would like that very much." Camillo took out his phone and sent a quick message. "I have just forwarded you her number." Gabriella then emerged from the back office, carefully carrying a large box filled with files. She set the box down on a nearby surface. "The final count is 147,000 reais in unreported cash. We also found another 200,000 in illegally withheld wages and completely fabricated debt payments." "And what about Senor?" Olivia asked, her voice quiet. "He is being transferred into federal custody within the hour," Gabriella replied without hesitation. "The charges include money laundering, human trafficking, coercion, and fraud. He will be extremely lucky to see daylight again in the next decade. What will happen to the regional manager, Augusto?" At the mention of his name, Camillo's expression hardened into a grim mask. "He is next on our list. We have already identified 6 other locations that were operating in the exact same way. All of them were under his direct supervision, and all of them were generating revenue through the exploitation of their workers." "6," Olivia repeated, her voice coming out much smaller than she had intended. "6 that we have found so far," Camillo clarified. "The full audit is still ongoing." He looked at her directly, his gaze intense. "This is much bigger than just one club, Olivia. It is a systemic problem, and it ends right now." A worker holding a clipboard approached them. "Senor Reis, the demolition team is ready. Do we have the authorization to proceed?" "Proceed with what?" Olivia asked, confused. Camillo's jaw was tight. "A complete structural renovation. We are gutting the entire second floor. Every single room, every wall, and every surface that was ever used to hurt people will be destroyed." "You are tearing it all down," she said in disbelief. "I am erasing it," he corrected her, his voice like cold steel. "When this building reopens, if it ever reopens, it will be something completely different. It will be something clean." "The Eclipse Lounge dies today." The worker stood by, waiting for his final confirmation. Camillo gave him a sharp nod. "Start with the upstairs rooms. I want them gone first." The worker immediately left to carry out his orders. A few moments later, the loud, rhythmic sound of sledgehammers began to echo throughout the entire building. It was the sound of walls crumbling and debris falling, the sound of the physical destruction of what had been a prison for so many women. Olivia felt a tight knot of tension loosen deep inside her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me," he said. "You are the one who found the courage to say no." I am just doing what I should have done many years ago. I am finally paying attention. You did not know what was happening here. I should have known. That failure is on me. He took a manila envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. This is for you. Inside, she found a set of official documents, legal papers, and a property deed. Olivia's hands began to shake. What is this? The building where you were staying before you started at the eclipse. I purchased it this morning. You now have an apartment there. It is paid for 1 full year. After that, the apartment is yours if you still want it. I cannot accept this. This is far too much. It is not a gift, he insisted. It is restitution. His voice seemed to soften just slightly. You lost your home because of my personal failure to properly monitor my own business operations. This is how I make it right. Hot tears began to burn behind Olivia's eyes. Why are you doing all of this for me? Camilla was silent for a long moment, considering his answer. My sister was trafficked when she was only 19 years old. She was promised a good restaurant job in Sao Paulo. She ended up in a situation that was not very different from yours. But she did not have the same strength to say no. And by the time I was finally able to find her, his voice trailed off into a painful silence. I was too late. She is still alive, he continued. But she is not the same person. She will never be the same person again. I am so sorry, Olivia said softly. I swore an oath after that. I promised myself I would never let something like that happen again. Not in any business that I controlled. Not on my watch. He looked around at the demolished club, a landscape of ruin. I failed that promise, but I will not fail a second time. The sound of the sledgehammers continued their work upstairs. The noise was strangely satisfying, almost cleansing. What happens to you now? Camillo asked, his focus returning to her. Olivia thought about the new apartment, the significant amount of money in her bank account, and the future that had suddenly opened up in front of her, like a door she had believed was locked forever. I do not know, she said honestly, but for the first time in a very long time, I get to choose. And that is enough. A small, rare smile touched Camillo's lips. Yes, he agreed. It is. The apartment was small, but it was immaculate. It had one bedroom, a kitchen with actual counter space, and windows that let in bright, real sunlight. Olivia stood in the middle of the empty living room, her canvas bag on the floor next to her, trying to fully process that this quiet, peaceful space was now hers. There were no shared walls with exploitation here. There was no heavy music bleeding through the floor at 3 a.m. There were no men loitering in the hallway, making offers that were not really offers at all. There was just silence, and safety, and choice. Her phone buzzed, startling her. It was Lucia. Hello, Olivia. The girl's voice on the other end was tentative and shy. Gabriella gave me your number. I really hope that is okay. Of course it is. How are you doing? I am scared, she admitted, but I feel better. I think they are putting me in a special program, with job training and counseling. They said they would help me find a legitimate job. That is good, Olivia said sincerely. That is really, really good. There was a brief pause. I wanted to thank you. For what? For being there last night, she explained. For telling the truth, even when it was so hard to do. I never would have talked to them if you had not been there. Olivia's throat felt tight with emotion. You would have, she insisted. You are so much stronger than you think you are. I do not feel very strong. Neither did I, Olivia confessed. But we both survived. That has to count for something. Lucia let out a shaky breath on the other end of the line. They arrested Senor this morning. Did you hear? I heard. Good, Lucia said, her voice filled with a quiet relief. I genuinely hope he rots in a cell. The venom in her voice was a new development. It was a healthy sign of her recovery. I hope every single one of them rots. They will, Olivia said with confidence. Camilla was personally making sure of it. He is kind of terrifying, is he not? Olivia allowed herself a small smile despite the grim subject. Yeah, he is, but in a good way. They continued to talk for a few more minutes, making some tentative plans to meet up for coffee and promising to check in on each other. It was the fragile, hopeful beginning of something that had the potential to become a real friendship. When Lucia finally hung up the phone, Olivia felt significantly less alone in the world. She spent the remainder of the day making the small apartment a livable space. A quick trip to a local secondhand store yielded a comfortable mattress, fresh sheets, and some basic dishes. A run to the grocery store stocked her refrigerator with actual food, not just the leftovers and scraps she had been forced to survive on at the club. By the time evening arrived, the space was already starting to feel almost like a real home. Her phone rang again. It was an unknown number. "Hello, Olivia Peters." The woman's voice on the other end was professional, yet also warm and inviting. "Yes, this is she. My name is Dr. Carvalho. I am a therapist who specializes in trauma recovery. Senor Reyes personally asked me to reach out to you. He possessed the kind of power that could make a person vanish. Instead, he chose to use it to protect her." The phone call explained everything. Counseling services had been arranged, but there was no pressure, no obligation. It was simply an offer, available if she wanted it. Olivia lowered herself onto the worn fabric of her new second-hand couch. He really did this. The man was covering all the costs involved. The only thing left was for her to make a decision about participating. "I... yes," she heard herself say, her voice barely a whisper. "I think I do." The voice on the other end was warm. "Wonderful. I have an opening tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Does that time work?" "Yes, thank you." After she ended the call, Olivia stayed on the couch, surrounded by the gathering darkness. Outside, the city lights began to flicker to life, one by one. She considered how radically her world had changed in just 24 hours. She remembered how perilously close she had come to disappearing entirely, to becoming nothing. It all turned on a single, unexpected question. What happened? The initial therapy session with Dr. Carvalho was more challenging than Olivia had anticipated. The doctor's questions gently peeled back the protective layers she had desperately tried to keep in place. They spoke about personal boundaries, about the raw mechanics of survival, and about the vast difference between an actual choice and an act of desperation. Dr. Carvalho's voice was gentle, but his words were firm. "You did nothing wrong." He held her gaze. "You need to understand that." For the first time, Olivia thought she was beginning to. She left his office feeling emotionally fragile, but a massive weight had lifted from her soul, a burden she had carried for so long she'd forgotten it was even there. On her walk home, she found herself in front of the old Eclipse Lounge. The building was almost unrecognizable. Construction crews moved purposefully across its facade. The sickly pink and blue neon that had once stained the night sky was completely gone, replaced by clean, hopeful white scaffolding. A large banner announced its future. It was becoming a community resource center, with a grand opening in the fall of 2026. Olivia stopped dead in her tracks. Not another nightclub, not another monument to greed, but something designed to actually help people. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Camo's name before she could change her mind. He answered on the first ring. "Olivia, I imagine you're looking at the sign." He described a place for job training, legal aid, and counseling for people desperate for a fresh start. He let the words hang in the air for a moment. It seemed fitting. "It is," she said, her voice full of emotion. "It's absolutely perfect." "I am glad you feel that way," he replied, "because I want you to help run it." Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. "What?" "You know what it feels like to be trapped with nowhere to go," he said plainly. "You know how the system is designed to fail people, Your perspective would be invaluable in making sure this place genuinely serves its purpose. But I am not qualified, she protested immediately. You are more qualified than you will ever know, he insisted. Think about it. There is no pressure. She stood on that sidewalk, staring at the very building that had been the backdrop to her darkest moments. Now it was being reborn as a place that might save others from that same fate. Okay, she whispered. I will think about it. After she hung up, the setting sun painted the clouds in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Olivia Peters walked toward an apartment that was entirely hers, with money in an account that she alone controlled, and with a future full of choices she was free to make. She walked with her head held high. There were no tears. The rain had finally stopped, and she was still standing. It was more than survival. It was a refusal to be broken, a refusal to make peace with a world that believed cruelty was normal. The entire chain of events started with one woman walking alone in the storm. It took one man who bothered to stop and ask a single question. A corrupt system that felt untouchable collapsed because one person finally demanded that it be held accountable. Some people get caught in the rain and are washed away into nothing. Others use the storm to change the very landscape, all because someone finally asked why. Olivia Peters had done both, and this was only her beginning. Here is the lesson this story leaves with you. Saying no is not a sign of weakness. It is the most powerful word you will ever speak. Olivia lost her job, her room, and her only sense of safety the moment she refused to cross that line. But that single word is what separated her from every other woman who was swallowed up by that place. It is what caught the attention of the one man who could tear the whole system down. And here is the deeper truth. Real power is not about control. Real power is choosing to protect someone when you could just as easily look the other way. One question changed everything. One act of courage brought an empire to its knees. Never underestimate the strength it takes to simply say no, and never underestimate what happens when the right person finally decides to listen. Thank you for staying with this story until the very last word. If it stirred something inside you, if it made you feel anger, hope, or relief, then please hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps this channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Leave a comment below and tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? And what moment hit you the hardest? I read every single comment, and I truly love connecting with you. If you have not subscribed yet, tap that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. And if you know someone who needs a reminder of their own strength today, share this video with them. You have no idea how much one click can mean to someone. If you are ready for another powerful journey, tap the next video on your screen right now. I promise it will be worth it. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and real value to our audience.